and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I'm joined by the man who lives in my computer screen, Mr. Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, pretty good. I'm waving at you from the top right corner of the screen where whatever voice / video chat thing that we always use resides, because that's how we all live our lives.
And we just leave it on constantly, even when we're just like searching on our computer. It's just on there.
Yeah, that's certainly what I do.
This week on the show, we are back, Matt. We're back. We took a couple weeks off. You were on vacation. You were out of the country. And so we couldn't get together and record. But we're back now, and we're here to talk about an obscure 2023 film that you saw on an airplane on your way home from vacation.
That's right. We're here to talk about Missing.
Missing, yes. We're going to talk all about this film. And I think we're going to use this as like a broader jumping off point to talk about not only this film, but the type of film it is, which I think we're calling them like screen films.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how to label that, but the type of film where the entire film is a computer screen or a series of screens. And that's what we're looking at, is just the screens. So if you're looking at my desktop right now, if I was pulling up Google, that would be the movie, watching someone Google things.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I guess we could call it like the modern version of found footage, kind of.
Yeah. I agree. It's sort of taking advantage of whatever the technology that is dominating the zeitgeist is, and then saying, well, how can we do storytelling with this?
Yeah. So we'll talk about Missing. We'll talk about those types of films. And then, Matt, I thought we could use your journey back to the United States as an opportunity to talk about airplane movies.
Sounds good.
And the difference between a normal movie and an airplane movie. We can get to the bottom of what makes viewing a movie on an airplane such a unique, interesting experience.
Yes, that sounds awesome.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. Matt, talk to me about Missing.
Missing. After her mother goes missing, a young woman tries to find her from home using tools available to her online.
This movie was written by Will Merrick, Nicholas D. Johnson, and Sev Ohanian. It was directed by Nicholas D. Johnson and Will Merrick, and it stars Stormy Reed. Stormy Reed, I believe, is Storm Reed. I don't know. I had this pulled up before, and I closed it right before we started recording for some reason. Storm Reed, Nia Grace, and not a few familiar faces, but not exactly like a star-studded film.
Yeah, right. I kept having that feeling of like, oh yeah, that guy. I love that guy, but not being able to remember his name.
Yeah. This is, I don't know if you know this, Matt, but this is technically a sequel. Sort of. There was a film that came out called Searching that came out in 2018 that starred John Cho. That is basically this film kind of reversed. In that film, a man's young daughter goes missing, and it's his journey through screens of trying to find her. I can't remember if it takes place in the same world or not. I think there is like a sly reference to it somewhere in this movie, but it's basically the same concept. Again, sort of.
Cool. I did not know that.
So what'd you think about Missing?
So I ended up enjoying this a lot, and that's the funny thing about airplane movies, which is inextricable from my reaction to this movie, which is like, this is actually what happened. Okay, on the first leg of the first flight, of which there were 4 total flights because of connections and so forth, my kids were watching this movie. And they were like, we've seen this before. And I was like, okay, I haven't seen this movie, but whatever, you can watch it. And I would be watching it on their screens without the sound, partly because it's just something for your eyes to do during the endless, dead, boring hours. And also because I'm sort of like checking that it's appropriate for them. And I found like my very first reaction was sort of an eye roll of being like, oh my God, we're doing this now. We're doing the entire movies via screens. How gimmicky, how stupid. Because I'm an asshole, and that's my approach to things. And then finally, on like some subsequent leg, I was like, I don't know. It seems kind of like I'm kind of interested to find out. Like I keep seeing these things, but I don't really understand what's happening. So I'll just watch it, sure. And then I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed how like twisty it was as a thriller. Where
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you think of yourself as pretty trope savvy and pretty genre savvy for thrillers, but the movie is really good at like the triple whammy where it like sets you up to expect the double cross, but then it's actually a third thing that you didn't expect, and it's in it, but it's always fair in that it's like it's been set up, and maybe you could have even guessed it if you were really really thinking hard about it. So
Yeah.
I liked that a lot, and then I also ended up liking the style. I thought it was like clever and like really precise in terms of like guiding your attention, because a lot of the movie is like text moving around the screen, which you'd think would be terribly boring, but it's like no, they're like pacing. They're showing things on the screen for exactly the right amount of time for you to parse it, and then
Mhm.
it moves on before you can get bored, and it's very thoughtful at that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you've gotten the chance to watch the trailer for this movie, but there's something about this movie, and it's the same about the Searching movie that came before it as well, is you watch the trailer and you're like, "Oh, okay, I don't need to see this movie anymore," because the trailer kind of laid out the entire plot for me. And the
Uh-huh.
thing that's actually great about this is, um, no, not actually.
Yeah.
Like the movie's so twisty and turny that like the thing that they showed in the trailer is actually the first of like 7 twists that the film's gonna make before it comes to an end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like I like that, and it's fun to watch. I think there are times when like I don't know, it gets a little overbearing that it's like it's so obviously about to set up something that you think is something, then it goes somewhere else.
Uh,
But I do think I don't know. I was as you were talking, I was like debating how much we should spoil about this movie because this is a movie that did come out this year. It's relatively new, and I don't think too many people have seen it. So I don't know if I just want to spend the whole episode like just talking about each and every plot element of the film, but I do think like there's things that I think are very cleverly set up and then that pay off very well in the movie. Like it just uses, you know, the basic story structure of setup and payoff. Like I think the way the bad guy at the end is defeated was something that was set up very, very early in the film as a thing that could happen with the technology they're using at the time.
yeah.
Um, and I just think it's clever writing, it's fun, it's propulsive.
Yeah.
You never really get bored.
Yeah.
I liked this movie a lot.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, I was wondering what your reaction, because we didn't really talk about this much other than that you said you watched it. And I watched
Mhm.
it, in the airplane context where it's like uh you're so sort of bored and like numbed by the situation
Yeah.
that you can watch a kind of a pretty bad movie and still find it, at least it's a reprieve from the boredom, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So I was like, did I really like this movie, or did I just like it because I was trapped on an airplane? And I think I did, and it sounds like you enjoyed it too. Although it doesn't sound like you loved it. It sounds like it's like, yeah, it was a
No.
functional thriller, and
Yeah.
I thought some of the I'll just return to the visuals for a second, because like
Sure.
it's nothing groundbreaking. It's just I thought it was clever, like just it's just clever. Like there would be stuff like, you know she clicks play on like a music player, so it's like the play button shape, or
Mhm.
but then the camera like swoops in, and the play button transforms into like the arrow shape of a locator icon on a map app, and you're now following the arrow shape through the streets to indicate that
Yeah.
like you're following someone on a trip, or she's following them as they make the trip, or whatever it happens to be. And it just made it more fun. Like there's another sequence, for example, where she's at a party. None of these are real spoilers. She's at a party, and it's like there's this like super fast cutting montage of people's like Snapchat images of her, or like her
Mhm.
in the background of some movie they're making with the just the movie app. And so like she remains in the center of the frame as we like flicker through a series of these different apps. So you see the different app interface, which changes, but she's always the persistent element. And I was just like, that's cool. I just think that's cool. That's like neat, you know. It's just a fun idea, you know. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. I couldn't even name all the times they do kind of cool things like this.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of understand the directors looking at this and saying like, this is, ultimately filming a movie this way is pretty flat and static, even if there's stuff happening on the screen, and we have to come up with inventive ways of taking that idea and making it a little bit more dynamic. And I think you're right. They really stretch the idea. Like, this is not just like a single computer screen film, right? Like, we are jumping into cell phone screens, we are jumping into a whole bunch of other things, like kind of really using the idea and the concept as liberally as we possibly can, while also still being in a screen every time. And I mean, it's like, I don't think it's an ever like textually part of the movie, but like just the idea that, we're telling a story about someone missing, and we're through the lens of screen showing how easy it is via the internet to get a hold of people's information. And I think that's a really interesting, cool thing too, that like, she manages to get the password to her mother's boyfriend's email account pretty easily, actually. She was able to figure out the password and crack it and get into there. And then once she has access, like, one of the things I love is like, once you have access to his email, like, you have access to everything, because even if you don't know his passwords to other stuff, you just click reset my password and boom, there it is on his email, and you can do everything. And so like, it is kind of making a commentary on the nature of security in this world, and all the information that is readily available. I was thinking about this after you told me you watched this movie, and it reminded me of there's this TikTok account, Matt, that's this guy that says, show me a picture or a video and I'll find where you are. And it's just like the one I saw was, this woman says, my daughter doesn't believe me when I talk to her about how easy it is to locate people on the internet by the simplest things. And so she's just standing in a parking lot in like a motel, and just like whips the camera around behind her and says, tell me where I am. And just with like 10 seconds of footage, this guy is able to pinpoint her exact location. Like very quickly, just like using landmarks and then Google Maps and algorithms to kind of SQL algorithms to kind of say like, oh, well, where a water tower and a hotel and a Burger King are all within 300 meters of each other or something. And it's terrifying but remarkable. And I think this is one of those things this movie is about, and using screens to do that. Like, this whole thing is a gimmick, right? You said it is. It's just a gimmick. It's totally just a gimmick, but it's a gimmick that's being used to make a point. And I don't know, that's one of the things that it's just a fun, silly, quick thriller, but also it makes you go, man, that's kind of crazy also.
Yeah. Well, that's, I totally agree with that it's like the theme weaves into the gimmick, the format, in a way where it feels earned and it feels correct. It feels like, oh yes, if you were going to do a movie with this format, with this gimmick, then this makes sense as a story that you would tell. And also, one thing to note, that to go in line with what you were just saying, is like, at no point did I really think there wouldn't be a camera there, because it's always like, I got, either it's security camera footage in a situation where there would be a security camera, or it's news footage in a situation where it would make sense that there would be news, or it's, even in certain situations, she'll like set the camera up to film herself doing something, because she intends on posting it later. And then that ends up being, the framed shot. And it's like, oh, that's like a very cinematic shot, but it's totally believable in universe that she would have set the phone up that way to catch that shot so that it would turn out looking cinematic, right? And it's just, it makes you realize like, oh, like, we do live in this world where we're basically always on camera. Like, even right now, sitting here talking to you, I'm not really thinking about it because our cameras aren't actually on, but I have a webcam looking at me, right? It's off as far as I know, but I have my phone camera sitting on the table in front of me. I have a GoPro sitting to my right. on the table. It's off. But like
Yeah.
the point is, yeah, like there's so many cameras around us all the time. And watching this movie makes you realize how actually uh, true that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is like there is some level of performance to everything people do now, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, I don't think there's ever a moment in this movie that strained credulity, because it does. We joked about it in our introduction that, like, she's just Googling something or doing in Google Maps, and she has her webcam program open still, which conveniently allows us, the viewer, to see a picture of her as she's typing on her screen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like, that helps us connect to the characters because we get to see their face and see their reactions, and it's necessary for the film to work. But there was never a moment where I was like, oh, that wouldn't happen, because when you and I stream for book club, our cameras turn on, and when I turn off that stream, I don't close Streamlabs right
Mm-hmm.
away. I don't close OBS right away. And so the camera's still on. And I'm just sitting there. I'm not streaming anymore. I'm just sitting there. The camera's on. So yeah, there was never a moment. Like, I feel like, we compared this to found footage, and I feel like there are always moments in found footage films where you're kind of like, okay, he probably would have put the camera down now.
Yeah.
But like, I think this is an elevation of that formula, where it's like, no, I totally believe that in this world we live in, this person would, be putting the phone in that position, would have the camera on, would be working through this whole thing, while talking to someone on video chat, or something like that. I just, like, that is the world we live in now.
Yeah.
And so there was never a moment for me where I'm like, okay, come on, would that really still be on camera? Would it be? I think it really expertly handles that, actually.
Sure. I mean, I think maybe it just nudges you slightly in the direction of like, this is maybe a world where people FaceTime instead of just call each other
Yeah.
more often than is the case in reality. But I FaceTime people. I it's funny, I didn't used to, but I do now more and more often.
Well, I guess this is one of those things that I wonder if this is a generational thing to me. And by the way, I think why this film works a little bit better in this department than the previous one, because in the previous one the daughter is missing, and it's her father looking for her, and so he's kind of doing everything through the computer. This one, it's a young girl, and I think the things where it's like she's texting using iMessage, but she's doing it through her computer, right? She's not iMessaging through her texts on her phone. She's like doing it on the computer. And then so when she FaceTime, she's FaceTiming on the computer. And like, part of that is like, do people really do that? And then part of me was like, no, I wonder if the kids today really actually do that. Like, I do think the younger generation FaceTimes considerably more than we do. I mean, like, we're the generation in between the people using their phones as phones. Like, the generation above us calls people. I think the generation younger than us calls people, and we're the why are you doing anything but texting me ever generation, I think.
It's shifted for me over time. I think, now I FaceTime my parents a lot more so they can see the kids. And the justification being like, you want the kids to know their grandparents' face. You want the grandparents to get to see their grandkids. But then, very often my kids, they'll say, hi, Granny, and then they'll like run off. And then it'll just be me FaceTiming with my parents. And then I realize like none of us are like, all right, well, let's turn off the cameras because the kids are gone. We're just like, yeah, this is enjoyable. I'm able to watch you while we talk. And, I spend a lot of the day on Zoom, not Zoom, Teams calls for work. I do surprisingly frequent video calls over Discord for various reasons. So the movie, funnily enough, made me realize how much time I do spend on video calls of various sorts, without, and then we do live streaming, so it's like, wow, yeah, this, it really has snuck up on me. But it's totally true.
I think the only part of the film that I would say like strains that a little bit for me is the TaskRabbit guy in South America. So as part of the plot of the movie, she there's basic her mother has gone missing. Is it Colombia? I can't remember
Yeah, it's
what
Colombia. Yeah.
country. Yeah. So her mother and her boyfriend have traveled to Colombia, and then they never arrived home. There is no she tries to contact the government and the FBI, and they basically won't do anything. And so she just hires a guy from like the Colombian version of TaskRabbit to go check up on what's going on there, and ends up developing a relationship with this guy where he constantly helps her out throughout the course of the movie. I think the one thing I found a little unbelievable is that they would be video calling each other as often as they were. I mean, once the relationship is established, sure, but like as early on as it was, I felt that was a little like I don't know if that would happen, but
yeah, I don't disagree at all. I think that's just kind of one of the few places in the movie where you just kind of have to suspend your disbelief.
Sure.
I mean, there are things where I'm like, okay, so another thing that's like probably unrealistic in some sense, but I actually loved it, is when she calls the hotel where her mom was staying, and they didn't have to do this. They could have had the guy who answered the phone at the hotel be like, "Oh yeah, I can speak English, of course," but they had him not be able to speak English. And then there's this great sequence where she's using Google Translate to type in the things that he's saying, and then like comically the first thing she types in is obviously wrong and it says something silly, but then it moves on from that to her translating what she wants to say into Spanish and then reading it, and then translating what he replies into English so she can read it. And it, like, I don't know if that would work in real life, but it works in the film. And it works smoothly enough that you don't really question it in the moment. I really like that sequence, despite the fact that it might totally be unrealistic. Like I just thought it was cool. It was another one of those moments where it's just a cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, it helps establish this idea of, like the power of the technology at our fingertips, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she mounts this whole search and rescue campaign from her home, from her computer screen, and like all the kinds of things that you would have to, all the kinds of things that you would have to like go out your house and do these things and fly down there and talk to a hotel and have a translation book in your hand, flipping through pages to try to get answers. These are all things that can be done real time in mid conversation.
I think that's one way in which the movie is able to keep such a good pace is if you imagine the version of this movie, very similar premise, but they made it 15 years ago. It would have been, okay, the girl goes to Colombia, because how else do you do that?
Yeah.
And then you got to do establishing shots, and you got to do, you got to do it would slow everything down so much. To do that, and because we're channeling it all through this conceit of it's all just a computer screen. Nothing. We can't show you anything that isn't happening via the computer screen. That actually, interestingly, allows them to be a lot more economical, because they can just skip stuff that we would sort of have expected in a normal film.
Yeah. No, I agree. One other thing, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about one other cool thing this gimmick allows you to do, which is the type something and then delete it before pressing send thing. And this is a thing that like shows in movies that aren't computer screen things use, but it's definitely something that's used very effectively here as well. Like it's like, okay, how do we get into the mindset of a character when all we're shown is their computer screen? It's like, oh well, their mom types "I love you" and they start typing "I love you" back, but before they send it, they erase it, and that tells you so much about the mental state of the character and where her relationship with her mother is. And it's the type of like really interesting, unique thing that you get through this format of storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, lots of cool stuff like that. So one other thing I was unrelated to this topic, but just like more related to the topic of it being a movie I watched on the airplane, is I basically watched the movie twice, except I watched it twice in the manner that you watch airplane movies, which is frequently interrupted by like the snacks and the drinks and your kid needing their book from the backpack or whatever. Or maybe just the plane lands and you don't get to finish or what have you. So like,
Yeah,
despite the fact that I watched the movie twice, I never actually saw like a specific piece of the climax of the movie. So like, either time I watched it, which is funny, like I could piece together what must have happened in there. But it's just this is just a funny thing about the nature of watching movies on airplanes is like you never really see, not only do you not see the whole movie, you really even see more than like a 20-minute chunk before you're interrupted and then you miss something.
It's wild because I think you're right, and maybe we can kind of transition into our airplane movie
Sure.
conversation because it is a situation in which you would think you have the least amount of distractions ever.
Mhm.
Like eh, outside of being in a movie theater, like I can't imagine a way to watch a movie in which you're stuck in a chair in a tube in the sky. You're not going anywhere. It is the kind of thing where you are fully able to sit down and watch something, but also it is the most distracted you could ever watch a movie.
Yeah.
Um, not only because, yeah, like you said, there's drinks and other people around, and in your case, kids, but also like there's 70 other screens within your the vision of your eye, and
Uh-huh.
that's like I love that you said the first time you watched it was watching it on your kid screen because like this is a thing you do on airplanes, right?
Uh-huh.
Like a big component of the airplane movie is, oh, the person one row ahead of me and slightly to the right is watching Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I guess
Yeah.
I'm watching Star Wars on mute now. And
Yeah.
like at no point in that thing do you ever say, oh, I should put my headphones in and just boot up this movie that's also available for me on the screen right in front of me. No, you just kind of start watching a muted version of a movie. And like it's wild, but like everybody does that.
Yeah. No, I did that so many times on this trip where I'd just be like, I would literally like just kind of lean to the sides so that I could see through the cracks and be like, what are they watching? No, no. Oh, that looks interesting. And then I would just watch it
Yeah.
through the cracks of the seat. Like,
Yeah. Why do
yeah.
we do this?
On one leg of the flight, on one of the four flights, my uh my headphone jack didn't work, or actually my whole system didn't work, just me.
Hmm.
So that was my excuse on that particular leg. But yeah, I mean, it is so funny. Like I think I watched probably half of the birdcage, on somebody's seat, like four rows up. Um, and then later I was like, the birdcage is really good. And then I watched the birdcage actually, where it's so weird. Such a weird. It's so funny. It's also funny to say like, I know I said that I was bored, and it's like bored is not really the right word. It's like a very unique mental state that is kind of unique that you're on when you're on an airplane, because it's like all of the normal things that you would do to distract yourself in a situation where you're like you can't do anything. You can't do
Yeah.
any of the things you would normally do. Um, but also it's like a really, really unusual environment. So it's not quite that you're bored. It's almost like you're in this weird like uh limbo of it's like I don't know. I'm not. I was trying to articulate this because like in one sense it's crazy to say that you're bored, because it's like
Hmm.
you're like one of the first generations of humans to experience the miracle of powered flight. You open that window and you can look out across the earth and the clouds, and it's an incredible sight. And you dare say that you're bored. But it's really just like, well, yeah, okay, that's cool, and I totally, I think that's true. Like I love to look out the window of airplanes,
Yeah.
but you
Hmm.
can only do that for so long, and sometimes the flight is 5 hours long. You're not going to look out
Yeah.
out the window for more than half an hour. It's so it's just like the monotony of it, I think, is what makes it weird, actually, because
Yeah.
there's
I
so few
mean,
contexts where you're just sitting there for 5 hours.
yeah, and I think one of the big things too is no internet. I mean, there's certainly Wi-Fi available on a lot of these flights now. I usually don't buy it. I know a lot of people do. I don't. So it's one of the few times in my life where where not only am I, putting my phone down, but I'm forced to. Like, I don't. There's nothing I can do short of throwing a big chunk of money out there to give me access to the world via the internet, and there's like almost no other time in my life where that's the case, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this unique moment of being cut off, and so like I'm the type of person, and I know you're kind of this way too, where I always feel like I need to be doing something, and so I'm like constantly like, oh, if I got to be watching something, and while I'm watching something, I have to be doing something else, and blah 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 blah, and it's kind of a time where you're kind of forced out of that, and
Yeah.
that's why I think I'm, mentally okay with just watching someone else watch an episode of The Office that I've seen 40 times before on the screen 2 rows ahead of me.
Yeah.
Because that you're just in this kind of liminal state, sort of.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable, actually. There's really nothing. There's really no comparable state to being on an airplane with a screen in front of you. That's not that is sort of connected to the internet, but not really connected to the internet.
God, I love calling it a liminal state because it literally is, because you're between places, but it's like you're between places mentally and physically, and to speak to what you're saying about not buying the internet option, even though you can, I elect not to buy the internet option because I'm like, this is one of the few times when I know that I can reliably stop myself from wasting several hours on the internet.
Yeah.
And if I try to stop myself from wasting several hours of the internet when I'm at home, I'll just fail. And I'll end up doing it anyway. But in this situation, I'll just not buy the internet, and then I don't have that option. And and it's this wonderful reprieve where you get to think your own thoughts for a few hours, which sometimes I get done with the flight, I'm like, God, I should do that more often, and then I forget about it immediately, right?
But there are people that work on airplanes, and I'm like, absolutely not. For many reasons, one of which being that like I'm a tall, big guy, and I really like, it's almost impossible for me to put the laptop on the tray table and have it angled far back enough,
right,
that it's in a comfortable position, especially when the person in front of me is leaning their chair back. Like, it's just there's no comfortable position on modern flights where I could just sit and work at a laptop. So and plus I am like just morally against doing work on an airplane.
I maybe I'm being silly, but I sometimes feel like they turn down the oxygen a little bit, because sometimes I in the past I have tried to pull out my laptop and work, not often, but a few times, and every time I do, I'm like, I'm just not like thinking at my normal level, and I think it might have to do with the distractions. I don't literally think that they're suffocating you, but they do say that when there's elevated CO2 in the air, that you can feel drowsy. So I do wonder if like they've got that many people in basically an enclosed space, if maybe that's a factor there.
Maybe I am not a napper, and I fall asleep on planes a lot. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's something going on there where I can't effectively work even if I wanted to on an airplane. And maybe that's part of the nature of the liminal space, is like I really can't like do anything in the active sense. So, but I can passively rotate between entertainment options. That's one thing I can do. So that's what I do.
So what makes a good airplane movie then? Like, what are the, let's see if we can come up with like the characteristics that would make a good airplane movie. What do you think?
Oh gosh, my first airplane movie memory is being a kid and watching the Flintstones movie like 5 times in a row, because we were flying on a 12-hour flight. Does that mean the Simpsons movie is a good airplane movie, or does that just mean that is the kind of thing that a kid will do when left unsupervised on an airplane? I don't know. I don't know if I can. Yeah, like I don't know if I can read anything into this. But there does seem to be a type, right? There seems to be a type of movie that is an airplane movie. Like I think a shorter movie is better.
Yeah.
I think like a lighter movie is better. Like
Yeah.
a really serious artistic movie to me is not an airplane movie.
Yeah, I tried to watch there's this movie. I'm laughing not because the movie's funny, because it's not. There's this movie, it's a brilliant movie and I can't remember the name of it, but I watched it last year on a plane. It's basically a like kind of sort of a stage play type thing where um two pair the you kind of learn as the movie's going that the mother and father of a school shooter are meeting with the mother and father of a kid who died at the school shooting, and that's kind of revealed to you slowly over the course of the film. And they're like just meeting with them for like the last time, just like desperately trying to understand why their son did this and what he was thinking. Is a brilliant movie, wonderfully written, incredibly performed, just traumatizing and horrible, and I wept. Like, that's a terrible plane movie. That's like the worst fucking thing to watch on an airplane ever. I don't know why I did this to myself. And so like I think you're right that like overly dramatic, over like serious stuff does not make good for good airplane fare at all.
Yeah. As I was flipping through the channels, I also stumbled across The Transporter, and I was like, this is the perfect airplane movie.
Yeah.
Because this is just like a stupid action movie, which I love. Although I'm not, having watched some of it on the airplane, I'm not entirely sure that it holds up, which is tragic.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, yeah, like it's not serious at all.
Yeah.
Trying to think, I can't think of any examples, but I know that I have watched serious, slow-paced, sedate, artistic movies on airplanes, and basically just like stopped and just watched something else because it's just like I'm looking for something to distract me from the monotony of my current situation, not like fill me with an even greater ennui. So yeah, it's
yeah. And I think there's a similarity here with this and what my wife calls laundry movies, which are movies you can just throw on while you're folding the laundry and stuff like that, and you're doing another task, you're really not paying attention. But I do think there's a difference here though, because like I don't like I was thinking about, oh, what's a really great laundry movie is the Michael Bay Transformer movies. Like, those are great laundry movies.
mm-hmm.
But I don't think that would be a good airplane movie, because I do think like you have to take into account the rather small screen you're watching this thing on. And I think like if you were imagining watching like a Michael Bay film for the first time on this tiny little screen, in poor resolution right in front of you, I feel like would be a terrible choice. So I feel like a light fare, with some fun action, I think you're right, but like not action to the point of spectacle, because I don't think spectacle really translates on that small of a screen.
Yeah, that's a good point, because one of the movies that was playing on rotation on these flights was that new movie 65.
Oh, the Adam Driver dinosaur one?
Yeah, Adam Driver dinosaur one. Have you seen this one?
I have not watched it, no.
I don't think it was very good, but regardless of that, like, it's especially kind of inert as an airplane movie, because it is like, spaceships exploding in the atmosphere, and then dinosaurs fighting and attacking, and you're shooting the dinosaurs, and I mean, you've seen the trailer, you kind of get it. I'm not spoiling anything, but like none of that works on a 7-inch diagonal screen. It just you're like, I can't really see what's happening. It's dark. Like there's like a whole action sequence that happens like in a dark cave, and can't tell what the hell's happening.
That's true, because the lighting is almost never ideal for for airplanes. Like, whether it's the person next to you in the middle of your movie like rips open the blinds and just sprays bright sunlight all over your screen, or just the general lighting of the cabin. And then I mean, like the interjection of the intercom stuff every 5 minutes to tell you to turn your seatbelt sign on.
Yeah. That's another movie where I didn't actually at no point did I watch it with the sound on properly, but I think I got the gist of it based on having been in the airplane watching it on other people's screens for a total
Yeah.
of something like 15 hours over the course of all of those flights. Um, uh, but it struck me as something I wouldn't have enjoyed if I had been paying attention to, because it's just like,
Yeah.
It's too serious. Also, there was a lot of emotions happening, and I'm like, God, I don't need that right now.
I think another required rule of airplane movie has to be no nudity and sex stuff. I mean, I know, like, you know, most of the movies that they show are either edited for content, or they just don't put those type of movies on the in-flight service. But I decided once on my laptop on an airplane to watch HBO's Rome. Let me tell you something about that, Matt. It's a lot of people fucking. That's a whole lot of it. And as we've already established, one of the things you do on an airplane is look at other people's screens. And I was incredibly conscious the entire time that, and it's like, it's one of the things where do I immediately turn it off and slam the case of my laptop shut? If so, I'm like acknowledging something. And so my choice in that moment was just to ride it out. And I was in a middle seat and I had two strangers on either side of me. And let me tell you, not a great experience. Good show, HBO's Rome. Good show, but definitely not an airplane show.
Yeah, no, I've definitely been in the sort of the opposite situation where I'm watching, you know, caddy corner, a couple rows up, somebody watching something just wildly rated R on their computer. You know, the only, I mean, I don't know, you know, I don't see anything wrong with it except for the fact that there's going to be kids on the plane sometimes. So
yeah,
I don't know. I would just, you know, probably I would just like look around before I did, you know, but yeah, it's such a weird. There's also just the fact that you're crammed in with all these strangers, and and like all of our typical assumptions about privacy are like severely strained because you're just totally able to hear any conversations they may be having with their seatmates.
Or literally watching them create that work email that I've totally done. I've watched someone write a work email. It's like, exactly. I shouldn't be doing this, and yet here we are.
Or like, you can, you know, the way people hold up their phone to their face when they're typing a text, it's like exactly the right place for you to see what they're typing by looking between the seats. And and part of you is like, I shouldn't look at this, but I also don't really care or think I'm doing anything wrong by doing so. And, you know, we're all friends here.
Man, this is really fascinating because there's really no other experience on Earth in which you are in this close quarters with a stranger. Because, like, I mean, yeah, like trains and buses and stuff, but those are very temporary, right? Like you're on a subway, you're not on a subway for more than 20-30 minutes maximum usually. And even so, the people that you're in close quarters with are kind of constantly shuffling and changing, and this is, you know, 2 hours minimum usually, very, very close to the same person the entire time, able to like completely observe each other's entire existence and world and everything that you're doing. And so it's definitely the entertainment you're watching during that time must be adjusted to take into account that person next to you is totally watching it all.
I mean, I don't know, this feels weirdly personal to admit some of these things, but like, you're so bored and you're so like starved for stimulation that you'll just start doing like a Holmesian cold reading on someone sitting near you, where you're like, okay, you know, let me think about this. Professor, maybe some kind of academic, probably, judging from like their tweed jacket and like the stuff they're doing on there. Okay, they're a mathematician and they're married. All right, they're married. Do they have children? I'm looking for evidence of, and it's like, you didn't decide to start doing that, but just like you're so goddamn bored that that kind of thing starts happening, and it's not a thing I normally do. Anyway, it's an interesting setting.
It is, and again, this is why the movies you pick have to be conscious of that. Like, I don't know. I feel like the studio comedy is like the airplane movie because it's like it's designed to be generally harmless and broadly funny and relatable. I think if it has more physical comedy sections to it, it functions for the muted observer to your right. It is also the type of thing where you're not totally bothered if it's constantly being interrupted because the jokes are pretty quick to develop and pay off. And so like the risk of you getting like mid joke sequence with a PA announcement are pretty low. I just feel like this is the sweet spot for plain moviedom is the studio comedy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, just a quick, a high JPM, jokes per minute, is very important.
Yeah.
And situational comedy type things are good, and you can kind of dip in and out. And I mean, really, I think actually maybe now that we've thought about this for a minute, like maybe one of the most important qualities is that you can just jump into the middle of the movie and kind of feel like that's fine. Feel like even if you miss the first part, you're okay. You're not lost. You're not like needing to ask people questions. You're just like, okay, I understand this situation, and then just go along with it, and then maybe you'll feel like, oh, I enjoyed that. I want to go back and watch the beginning so that I can understand the full context.
Do you think Missing is one of those movies that you could seriously just jump in the middle and kind of pick up what's going on? Because I kind of think it might be.
Yeah, weirdly, yes. Like, it seems strange to say that about a twisty and turny thriller, but you jump into it and it's changing. What's going on is changing at such a fast rate that if you jump into the middle of it, you'll be sort of in a whole new situation in like 5 minutes anyway. So it doesn't matter that you kind of know exactly how we got into the situation. And the premise is pretty simple. It's like, okay, like the basic form of the premise is just the girl's mother has gone missing. She hasn't come back. She's looking for her. That's kind of all you need to know to pick up at any given point.
Yeah, I agree. It does function well in that, surprisingly, because I think it is a little weird that you say something's really twisty and turny. You would assume that would mean it would be alienating to someone joining in halfway through, but no, I think I think in this particular case it works pretty well.
So one funny thing about the about both 65 and Missing is like Missing features a person traveling and then to at least a first appearance is being kidnapped while abroad after a plane trip, and then 65 features a graphic spaceship crash sequence where spoilers for the first 5 minutes of the movie, like tons of people die. These are both things that I thought you weren't supposed to do on airplane movies, so I'm kind of surprised. But
it's like watching Titanic on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do that.
You're not supposed to do that.
What would like the worst, would Sully, the movie about the I guess that's a successful plane crash.
I think Flight is a good
Flight would be good. Life, that one about the soccer team that their plane crashes in the Alps and they eat each other to survive. Probably not one you want to watch on an airplane. Castaway, probably not. I don't want to watch that one.
Castaway would be a bad one. I did read the first time I read the novel Life of Pi was actually on a cruise ship, which is a novel about the shipwreck and then a boy having to go through a horrible ordeal on a lifeboat.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I never quite made that connection until this moment, but
Huh.
yeah, that's
United 93 would probably be one I would say stay away from watching that on an airplane.
Yeah, that one for sure. That would
although I'm gonna go ahead and say generally just avoid watching that movie. Not because it's a bad movie, it's just like I don't want to relive this ever. Why would I watch that movie?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I have a tangential question. Like
sure.
every time I sit next to the window, every time I have a window seat, I'm like looking out the window a ton because I think it's amazing. It's like this is one of the narrow slices of my life when I get the opportunity to partake in the sacred ritual of looking out upon the beauty of God's green earth. And like nobody, like you'll be on a plane and like nobody's looking out the window, and it's not it's not for any reason. It's not like, oh, the pilot told them to leave the window. It's just like they're just not. And I'm like, is it because they're not interested and they have no joy and their souls are dead? Or is it because they basically have a fear of flying and they're trying to distract themselves from the fact that they're hurtling through the sky, and so they keep the window closed as a means of controlling their anxiety, and maybe being afraid of flying is more common than I realize. I don't have a good answer to this, and it just confuses me, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, my dad was a pilot, and so I flew a lot as a kid, right? Because we got to pass ride non-rev all the time. And yeah, I always wanted the window seat, and I was always looking out the window. I very specifically remember playing a game with myself, like watching the cars below as we came in for final approach go from micro machines to matchbox cars to full size cars. Like that's a game I played with myself every time. And I loved looking out the window, and I still do. Like if I have the window seat, I usually give the window seat to my wife. Also because the aisle's better for me because I can cheat and get a little bit more leg room for one of my legs,
right?
by just putting it into the aisle. But no, I love looking out the window of planes. I think it's great. I think it's really cool. Like especially during takeoff and landing, I think it's the coolest. And no, I have no idea why people don't. I think it's a combination of just so kind of absorbed in their own world and life that it's a lacking the ability to stop and smell the roses type thing a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, I see a fair amount of people do it still, though, especially during landing. I think landing is really interesting to people.
I think you're right. I guess I was just shocked on these particular flights where very nearly every window on the plane was closed. And I was kind of just like, I want to look out the window. If somebody even if I'm in the the middle seat and somebody's got the window open, I'll try to lean so I can look through the window every once in a while just because I think it's cool. I don't know. I guess I guess both of us agree on this, so we don't have any insight here. But
no, yeah. The house I grew up in around here was on one of the approach lanes for our airport, and so the one fun thing that I always wanted to do was say like, oh, which direction are we approaching the airport from this time? Am I going to get to see my house or not? And it's you don't know until you look down and start trying to identify the landmarks around your city. That's another fun thing that I still do to this day.
Yeah,
because it's fun.
Yeah, or like at various times I've like flown over the Rockies, and it's like,
oh, that's so cool.
When else in your life do you get to look down on the Rocky Mountains and see this incredible, like if that were a thing, if it were like pay money to go fly over the Rocky Mountains, you could look down upon the Rocky Mountains from 5 miles in the air. It's a fantastic, breathtaking sight. How much would you pay for this? It's like, well, no, you're not paying for it. You're just flying somewhere. So keep the window closed because it's boring, I guess, now, because it's not the thing that you're here to do on purpose. I don't understand. I don't get it.
I mean, a counterpoint is like you could be watching that, or you could be watching another excellent Jim prank on Dwight on the same episode of The Office you've seen 47 times.
That's a great counterpoint, Scott. Yeah. or you could be watching Missing. But I mean, see, if I were in the window seat, I don't think I would have watched Missing. So.
Oh, interesting. So you like, I would probably still put it on. It would just be like, I would even be paying even less attention because I would be sharing time between looking out the window.
That's true. Let me not be ridiculous. If I'm on a 5-hour flight, I am not going to be looking out the window for 5 hours
the entire time.
But definitely, yeah.
I always have this really grand idea that I'm going to read like a ton on an airplane. Like I really like, it's like, oh man, I'm gonna knock out 3 hours of reading on this book on this airplane, and it like never happens that way. Like I'll read for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm good, I'm done with the reading.
We had just talked about this, and you had made this point to me, and I had been like, yes, Scott, you're right. It is silly to bring a big brick of a novel on an airplane. And then I brought, for some reason, like 8 pounds of novels on this trip in my carry-on. I don't understand why. And I think it's a sickness, it's a because you do think you're like, there's something romantic about the notion of sitting in that airplane seat where it's like a magical liminal space, like you said. And you're like, I'm in my liminal space where nobody can bother me, and I've got my novel, and this is so awesome. And the truth is, it never is. It never is the way you imagine it to be. I did read some House of Leaves on the airplane, but not maybe like an hour total. So
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know. I think the worst possible thing in my mind is wanting to read and not having something, and so I always overpack books. Which is silly because I also bring my Kindle, which has infinity books on it if I wanted it to, and yet I'll still throw my copy of it in my fucking carry-on that weighs 10 pounds. And yeah,
I also imagine that I would read these novels like on the vacation that I was on, and I think they all just sat in a stack and were never touched, and then went back into the carry-on. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. You're visiting someplace you've never been before. Like there's moments like when I went to Hawaii with my wife, like there were moments that, we sat on the beach and just read for an hour or two, and that's great, and I love that. But for the most part, you probably shouldn't be reading too much on a vacation. Probably should be exploring or doing something. I don't know.
I think I imagined that I would be reading them in the evenings when I was lying in bed winding down.
Sure.
But it was never like that. It was always just like you're sort of doing things and then you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
we were talking about time off today at my office, and my boss's boss was like, "Yeah, I went to Hawaii in January, and I worked all day every day till dinner time." And I just wanted to be like, "What is wrong with you?" Like, there's no way it was that pressing. There's you're in Hawaii. Like, how often are you in Hawaii? Like, stop it.
Yeah.
Just stop it.
Yeah, I don't get it. I know some people like that too, and I'm just like, I don't know. I work really hard when it's time to work.
Yeah.
When it's time to vacation. Yeah. You got one life on this earth. You should experience these things that you're never going to get another chance to experience while you have a chance to.
Like missing on an airplane.
Like missing on an airplane. There you go. Full circle.
Full circle. We did it, Matt. We did it. Bit of an unorthodox episode for us this week, but no, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think I'm trying to remember where Missing is. I mean, Missing is available on your airplane, on your local airplane. But I believe it's some other places as well.
Yeah, definitely. You got to book a flight to watch this movie. Unfortunately,
it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix.
Okay. I guess that's slightly more accessible. All right, fine.
Yeah, little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's worth checking out. I think we managed to not really spoil it at all. So you can still boot it up and enjoy it. And Matt, if you like that, I would suggest Searching as well. Although I don't know, maybe you'll be looking at it and be like, oh, this is kind of the same thing, only we flipped it, and now it's the dad looking for the kid versus the kid looking for the mom.
So my kids really like this movie. Do you think they would like Searching?
Yeah, I mean, if they really enjoyed this, I think they would. And I don't like. We didn't really talk about how many of these movies there are, because there's a fair amount of them now. I don't know how your kids feel about horror, but there's of course horror versions of this thing, right? There's a movie called Unfriended, which is a group of kids doing like a video chat, and there's like a monster in the video chat that is slowly killing them one by one. There's another movie called Host that was made in the middle of COVID that is literally just a Zoom movie, like, and everyone was in different locations and they just made a Zoom movie. So
Cool.
There's a fair amount of these now.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's like a whole YouTube genre of like kid horror, which is a fascinating wrinkle in our modern world. So I don't know how they would react to like true horror. I mean, actually, that's not true. I've shown them scary movies, and they.
Yeah.
When I say there's one of my kids in particular likes horror. Not all of them do.
So both of the Unfriended movies are actually R, which surprised me because I kind of thought they were PG-13, but they're both R. So maybe those. I know your kids have seen rated R movies before, but maybe stay away from those.
Yeah, or at least,
but searching, I think would definitely be safe for them to check out.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so I think I just like I think part of the reason they liked it is it's more or less the first thriller they've ever seen. Like they've seen a lot of movies, but I don't know that they've ever seen like a real thriller, like a real kind of twisty turny that kind of movie. And so like because they were like really into like talking about like and then I can't believe that that guy was actually and it was like, oh, like you've never really watched a movie like this before. I can and that's cool. I was happy that they kind of got that experience.
That is really cool. I think one day we have to have a conversation about thrillers, because thriller is a genre where I always struggle to be like, I know it when I see it, but if you asked me to like name the properties of a thriller, I don't know if I'd be able to do that.
Yeah.
And like I feel like I just, out of curiosity, I just like Googled thriller movies while you were talking, and like it's hilarious all the different types of movies you get. Like I have The Guilty, which is a great thriller. Actually, it's a movie, like a kind of a concept movie about a 911 operator played by Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a remake of a foreign film that I saw at Fantastic Fest that I think the original is better, but like it takes place in one room, which is just the 911 operator's room, and he's trying to help this woman who calls in, who's like being kidnapped by her boyfriend or something. That is a thriller. But then also right next to it is Evil Dead Rise, and I'm like, that's not a thriller.
Yeah,
that's just a horror film.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's one of these things where there's fuzzy boundaries. Like I just looked up a list. It lists No Country for Old Men as a thriller. I'm like,
yeah. I mean, maybe I don't know. See, this is a good thing. We need to write this down and have a conversation about this one day, because like what constitutes a thriller? I don't know.
Yeah, The Game. That's sort of a definitional like central example of a thriller.
Well, now, like, as I'm scrolling down this list, it's like action thrillers, thriller mysteries, friendship thrillers. Cocaine Bear is a friendship thriller. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that, but I love that that's a category.
Thrillers about kidnapping.
I really, I do want to dig into this because I don't have a good working definition. It is kind of a I know it when I see it type thing.
Drive. Is Drive a thriller?
I don't really think so. I think Drive is more like what is it? It's a weird movie is what it is. Like it's hard to categorize.
Is John Wick 4 a thriller?
Is The Silence of the Lambs a thriller?
Maybe. Is Shutter Island a thriller? I kind of think Shutter Island is a thriller.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I think so.
This is
and that similar one that Verbinski did. Cure for Wellness.
Cure for Wellness, yeah. That's a thriller for sure.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated by this because my brain is reeling at what is and isn't a thriller.
Me too.
This thing says Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is a thriller, and let me tell you, absolutely not. There's nothing thrilling about that piece of shit movie.
Well, that's my as of this moment, my favorite working definition is: does the movie thrill me? Then it's a thriller.
Well, there you go. There you go. I think that's going to do it for us this week, Matt. As we said, a little bit of an unorthodox episode, but a good conversation nonetheless. If you have any opinions on searching missing these screen movies or on airplane movies, please reach out. You can email us you can email us at doofmedia@gmail.com. You can message us on Twitter at doofmedia, and you can go to the Doof Media subreddit r/doofmedia. Our subreddit still exists, although the rest of Reddit doesn't. Have you been following this Reddit blackout thing, Matt?
I'm vaguely aware of it.
Yeah,
but I don't understand any part of it.
I don't know.
I'm too old to learn. So,
well, there you go. Well, we're still there. That's all you need to know.
All right. If you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so. And that way you'll never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, any of the other platforms.
If you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and pledge at any of the available levels. We've got tons of bonus podcasts, stuff that's probably more similar to the tenor of this conversation. So if you liked this, I think the bonus stuff we have over there on the Patreon is going to be right up your alley.
That's well said. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcast. Each review gets us more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. And that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, Matt, I really want to talk to you about the new Spider-Man movie. I saw it while you were on vacation, so I'm going to need you to go see that movie as soon as possible so we can talk about it. And so I'm putting it out here that's what our episode is going to be next week, to pressure you into going to see that movie.
Okay, that's always a fun gambit. We'll see what happens.
I mean, worst case, we just do something else.
Okay.
There's really no risk here, but go see Spider-Man, please. I want to talk to you about it.
Yes, I want to see it. So.
Okay. So probably, maybe that next week we'll do something. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.